Busia sighed for the umpteenth time that day. Not having a moment of rest after years of sleepless studies was karmic punishment enough. But having to share a tent with Pinya? Really, the universe was even charging her debts from the past. She didn't see him as a friend, nor as an enemy. In fact, the term karma staff seemed more appropriate. Bua stood staring at the sign in front of the green tent, made of a material resistant to sun and rain, which served as a dormitory for the employees involved in the operation. The hotel was 200 meters from the accident site, in a separate area, where 7 other tents were arranged in a row. In the tent where Bua was assigned, there was a white sign with black letters that said Dr. Busia Meffin. However, what really bothered her was the logo below, which displayed the name Dr. Pinya Thananon. Judging by the title Doctor before Pinya's name, Bua realized he had finally graduated. After their last fight, Pinya had disappeared without a trace, and no one knew what had happened to him. Like Bua, he was a specialist in physical anthropology. However, the professors often sent her to the field, especially to sites of archaeological discoveries and studies of ancient civilizations, which gave her additional experience in historical civilizations of humans. Bua let out a resigned sigh, accepting what seemed to be her fate, when she heard footsteps approaching from behind. Pinya, holding a large backpack, walked past her, purposely bumping into her shoulder. For a brief moment, Bua felt a strong desire to extend her foot to make him stumble, but she held back with great effort. "Have you studied so much and still managed not to evolve into a vertebrate animal?" Bua said. Gone and come back worse than before, with no education at all. Though she hadn't stuck out her foot, her mouth was faster than her thoughts. The words made Pinya turn quickly, his eyes flashing with anger as he reached out to grab Bua's collar. But Bua, with a quick pat, pushed his hand away in time. "It seems that specialization has left your mouth especially sharper, Dr. Bua," Pinya said, a sly smile appearing at the corner of his mouth, his gaze fixed on Bua's lips. "Watch out for that pretty little mouth, Doctor. Who knows, someday, some upper limb of a lower creature might strike you when you least expect it." With that, Pinya turned around. "I'll sleep in the bed near the entrance." "You get the bed in the back," he ordered in a tone that sounded more like a demand than a suggestion, which annoyed Bua at once. But she did not respond, she didn't want more trouble. Bua squatted at the entrance to the tent and picked up a handful of loose earth, holding it firmly in her hand. She closed her eyes and said a brief prayer, asking that everything would go well. Slowly, she let go of the earth in her hands as a gesture of respect and a request for permission from the spirits of the place so she could work and rest there. This was a ritual she always performed when visiting a new place. However, this time it seemed that luck was not on her side from the start. Pinya appeared again, passing by her. "I'll have something to eat, Boaloy," he said sarcastically, using the nickname he'd given her during college without even looking back, and then left the area. Bua decided not to fight back, it would only waste time and put her in a bad mood. She knew Pinya's temper well, erratic and volatile, as if he suffered from a nervous disorder or had an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex, which affected his ability to process logical reasoning. Pinya rarely listened to what others said, he was stubborn, strong-willed, and had a habit of constantly complaining. As soon as Pinya disappeared from sight, heading toward the temporary refectory, Bua entered the tent to arrange her sleeping place. Of all activities, sleeping was undoubtedly her favorite. Since it was the first day, progress was still minimal. The work had become even more difficult when officials decided to pile up parts of the bones found. When Bua saw this for the first time, she nearly lost her breath. She had to intervene quickly, asking them to leave the bodies of the victims at the scene of the accident, in their original positions. Each body was to be marked with stakes and tape, separating them so that identification could be carried out more easily and quickly instead of trying to separate the bones stacked piece by piece. Separating the bones from the left side of the body from the right would already be a complicated task. The bones that had already been piled up would need to be arranged, categorized, and then it would be necessary to calculate how many bones each passenger should have, separating them by type. After that, she would calculate the height using specialized software and analyze them to determine which victim they belonged to so that the bodies could be separated and then handed over to the police. The records of all passengers were being collected and would be sent as soon as possible. At the same time, the Department of Aviation was in search of the black box to find out what had really happened to the plane, which was now nothing but debris. Bua had heard from Pena, between a few exchanged barbs during work, that the plane had lost contact and disappeared from radar. What had happened became known only when local residents called to report a deafening explosion, and upon arriving at the scene, they found the wreckage of the plane and body parts scattered across the area. Fortunately, no nearby residents were injured or killed, and there was no significant material damage, which prevented the tragedy from being even larger. Everyone was working hard to determine the cause of this disaster. What intrigued Bua most, however, was why Pena had appeared just at this time. Never mind, thought Bua. Pena isn't my problem, it doesn't matter when he showed up. Better to keep my distance, she thought, sighing again. It was something that always puzzled her. What could she have done to hurt Dr. Pena so much that their rivalry never ended? Professor Nasara had never shown favoritism, at least not that Bua could understand. In fact, it seemed that he liked Pena more, since he always sent him on field missions abroad. Pena had much more experience in the field than Bua, maybe 100 or 1,000 times more, though they were the same age, 34. Pena had already faced terrain and situations, no matter how difficult or extreme. So why did he insist on picking on someone ordinary like Bua? She knew, though, that thinking too much about it would only give her a headache without bringing any concrete answers. Bua decided to take a shower before looking for something to eat. She didn't want to wait for Pena to come back, because just thinking about seeing him at dinner time was taking away her appetite. Besides, after sunset, the air was beginning to cool, with a soft, cold breeze that promised a more comfortable night for sleeping. Bua knew the work there would be long. However, after the first shower of the day, she ended up not going to the cafeteria as planned. One of the officers had left a meal for her. "I think they noticed you were late for dinner and were closing the kitchen," the officer had said. They also mentioned the meeting was postponed until tomorrow morning. Hearing this, Bua immediately looked in the direction of the voice, which came from someone sitting on the canvas bed. Her eyes then went back to the food box and the 2 bottles of water on her bed, next to the badge she would wear during the operation there. Pena had already started unpacking his suitcase, while Bua picked up the food box and went outside to find a quiet place to eat and relax before facing the next day.